In California, rows of parked RVs now stretch for miles, not as a choice, but as the only option left for thousands who once had stable homes. What was once considered an emergency stopgap has become a permanent way of life for working families priced out of housing markets they helped build. From tech hubs to tourist towns, the surge in vehicle dwellings isn't confined to city fringes anymore.
Don't get fooled by the label. Subscribe now to uncover what's really behind your favorite brands. And get the truth Big Food doesn't want you to see.
It's transforming entire communities. Montana's sub-zero winters, Arizona's blistering summers, and New Mexico's long-standing poverty all shape the growing reality of mobile survival, where shelter comes on wheels and permanence has vanished. This shift isn't just about homelessness. It's a systemic unraveling. Wage stagnation, skyrocketing rents, and housing policies that haven't kept pace with demand have pushed more Americans into RVs than ever before. It's no longer a story about the poorest, but about a collapsing middle. As cities restrict overnight parking and offer few real solutions, the contrast between booming development and basic human need becomes impossible to ignore. The spread of RV encampments is a signal, not a personal failure, but a system cracking under pressure, demanding urgent and structural change before temporary becomes permanent for millions more. RV homelessness in 2025 is no longer a fringe issue. It's not just what happens to the chronically unemployed or the mentally ill. It has become the survival plan for millions of working and middle-class Americans who have been priced out, pushed out, and left behind. This crisis is growing in scope, spreading across urban centers, rural towns, and everywhere in between. It's not a lifestyle. It's a warning sign, one the country cannot afford to keep ignoring. This isn't about people choosing freedom or a minimalist lifestyle. This is about nurses sleeping in RVs after their shifts because they can't afford to live near the hospitals where they work. It's about delivery drivers and fast food workers parking in Walmart lots because rent has outpaced wages. It's about families with kids doing homework on folding tables in motorhomes because the waiting list for affordable housing is years long. This is America in 2025. The numbers don't lie, and the maps are clear. States like California, Washington, and Arizona are seeing massive increases in RV encampments, not just in cities but on the outskirts, in industrial zones, along highways, behind strip malls. And the trend isn't slowing down. It's accelerating. Because the cost of housing continues to rise, wages remain flat, and the so-called recovery has bypassed anyone not already ahead. California stands as the most visible symbol of the crisis. The state's housing shortage is catastrophic. Tens of thousands of people live in vehicles up and down the coast. From San Diego to Sacramento, entire stretches of city streets are lined with RVs. Many of these people have jobs. Some are even employed in city services, healthcare, and hospitality. But they cannot afford market rent. Cities have implemented safe parking zones as a stopgap, but these programs are underfunded, overcrowded, and nowhere near enough. Washington isn't far behind. Seattle, once a tech boom darling, now deals with sprawling vehicle encampments. Essential workers, baristas, janitors, bus drivers, can't afford to live where they work. Instead, they park wherever they can, constantly watching for police and tow trucks. Local governments shift the problem around instead of solving it. People are being criminalized for trying to survive. Arizona faces a dual burden: housing scarcity and extreme climate. RV dwellers living in the Phoenix heat face deadly temperatures with no access to air conditioning. In the summer, heat stroke isn't a possibility. It's a threat. People park under bridges, in shade, anywhere they can find relief. But relief is fleeting. Even for those lucky enough to have a functioning vehicle, the toll is constant. For the elderly, the disabled, and the sick, RV life is dangerous. But it's the only option they have. Montana's crisis is shaped by cold and isolation. RV communities huddled in rural areas now face sub-zero winters with limited access to water, heat, or health care. These aren't people running from responsibility. They're workers in seasonal jobs, retirees on fixed incomes, and displaced families. The state's lack of public infrastructure compounds the problem. With little shelter availability and vast distances between services, RV dwellers are left exposed, literally and economically. New Mexico, long struggling with persistent poverty, is now seeing entire regions adapt to vehicle living. For many, it's cheaper to buy an old RV than to rent a one-bedroom apartment. But with limited support programs and high unemployment in rural counties, the transition into mobile living isn't a stepping stone. It's a permanent downgrade in stability. And yet, it's happening on a massive scale. Not because people want to live in RVs, but because every other door has been slammed shut. Texas markets itself as a land of opportunity. But for many, it's become a land of contradiction. The state celebrates individual freedom while offering little structural support to the working poor. RV encampments ring the edges of growing cities like Austin and Dallas. Essential workers have no choice but to live outside the cities they serve. Texas lawmakers boast about business growth, but refuse to address the housing affordability crisis. The result is an expanding class of displaced workers who keep the economy running but are kept out of its benefits. Nevada tells the same story with a different backdrop. In Las Vegas, the hospitality industry fuels the economy, yet countless hotel workers and casino staff can't afford housing anywhere near the Strip. They live in RVs in the desert, under blistering heat, with no water hookups and no sanitation. Local governments push these communities further out of sight, out of mind, but the crisis grows. Nevada promotes personal liberty, but fails to deliver on the basics: housing stability, safety. Oregon faces rising housing costs with insufficient infrastructure. The state's progressive image masks a deep housing divide. In cities like Portland, RV communities now function as de facto neighborhoods. Some have their own internal organization, but without government support, they remain vulnerable, exploited by city sweeps and ignored by policymakers. The climate is punishing, and the mental health toll is growing. This isn't just poverty. It's systemic abandonment. Florida adds a bitter twist. It's one of the top tourist destinations in the country, but many of the people who make that tourism possible, hotel staff, theme park workers, delivery drivers, live in RVs tucked behind shopping centers or hidden in wooded lots. Hurricanes, humidity, and heat make vehicle living extremely dangerous, yet it's become the last resort. The state pours money into luxury development while offering nothing to the displaced workers who serve its economy. Colorado rounds out the top 10. Once a beacon for outdoor living and opportunity, the state now grapples with one of the highest household debt-to-income ratios in the country. Housing prices in cities like Denver and Boulder are astronomical. Many residents are turned to RVs not by choice, but by necessity. And as inflation pushes up basic costs, gas, food, insurance, RV life becomes more desperate. People are stuck. They can't go back to renting. But staying on the road is draining everything they have left. What these 10 states have in common is simple: growing economic pressure, rising housing costs, and a political system that isn't moving fast enough. These are not isolated issues. They're deeply connected. Wage stagnation meets housing inflation. Climate extremes meet policy neglect. Local inaction meets federal silence. And the result is an RV crisis that reflects not individual failure, but national collapse. This is what systemic breakdown looks like. It's not just foreclosures or bankruptcies. It's entire working communities being forced into mobile homes because there is no stable housing left. It's cities criminalizing people for parking where they need to sleep. It's families rationing gas just to make it to the next safe lot. It's a nation pretending this is someone else's problem while the crisis spreads like wildfire. There is no path forward without admitting the scale of this failure. The housing market is broken. Wages have been frozen in time. Public housing stock is a shadow of what it needs to be. And too many leaders are stuck in ideological battles while people sleep in parking lots. This cannot be solved with charity or one-time assistance. It demands structural change. Zoning laws need to be rewritten to allow for denser, more affordable development. Community-based solutions like safe parking zones and support services must be scaled, not piloted. Income diversification must be prioritized so that entire local economies aren't wiped out by a single industry's collapse. And every level of government, city, state, federal, must treat housing as infrastructure, not a commodity. This moment is not just a test of economic policy. It's a test of moral clarity. Because the people living in RVs today aren't invisible. They're the workers, parents, veterans, and elders that this country has failed. If we don't act, this won't just be a 2025 problem. It'll define the next decade. So if this spoke to you, don't let it fade. Like this video. Share it. Comment with what you're seeing in your community. And subscribe, because we're not backing down. We're covering this crisis until the people with power are forced to face the people they've abandoned. Because housing is not optional, and survival should not require wheels. The rise of RV homelessness isn't just a housing story. It's the clearest indictment yet of a system that's failed to meet its most basic responsibility: keeping working people housed. What's playing out across these 10 states is a transformation of American life, and not the kind you hear politicians brag about in press conferences. This is what it looks like when a country treats housing as a profit machine instead of human right. When wages stagnate, rent soars, and support systems break down, the road becomes home. Not because it offers freedom, but because there's nothing else left. Let's talk about the silence. The way this issue is ignored or sanitized in national discourse. You rarely hear lawmakers acknowledging it head-on. No one wants to admit that entire cities are now ringed with RV encampments, that school districts are seeing rising numbers of homeless students living in vehicles, that families with 2 full-time working adults still can't afford a 1-bedroom apartment in the same city they serve. This is a humanitarian crisis, but it's being treated like an aesthetic problem, one to be moved, policed, or hidden, out of sight, out of mind. And yet, the problem doesn't go away. It grows, because the causes, housing inflation, stagnant wages, poor zoning, climate pressure, are all accelerating. We're at the point now where even a modest increase in rent can send a family into a tailspin. Where missing one paycheck means losing your apartment. Where people are living in RVs while still paying off student loans. This is what collapse looks like when it's slow, quiet, and bureaucratically accepted. In places like California and Arizona, people aren't waiting for help. They've stopped expecting it. RV communities have their own informal economies now, their own security systems, their own rules. In many places, these communities are more organized than the local government's response. That should be a wake-up call. People are adapting because policy has failed them. And while the tech elite in San Francisco or the retirees in Scottsdale may be insulated from this reality, the people who deliver their food, clean their homes, and fix their infrastructure are not. We can't talk about RV homelessness without naming the broader hypocrisy. States that pride themselves on economic growth, Nevada, Texas, Florida, love to market themselves as opportunity hubs. Low taxes, booming business, population growth. But growth for who? Because while corporations flourish and luxury condos rise, the workforce that powers that success is sleeping in parking lots. And when these states are asked about solutions, they offer criminalization, anti-camping ordinances, parking bans, law enforcement sweeps. In other words, punish the visible signs of poverty without doing a damn thing about its causes. Let's be honest. If you can't afford a place to live on full-time work, that's not a personal failure. That's a policy failure. That's a market failure. That's a leadership failure. But too often, the burden is shifted onto the people who are struggling the most. They're labeled as irresponsible or transit or lazy. The reality? Many are doing everything right. And still, it's not enough. In Montana, for example, you've got families living in RVs through bitter winters, burning through propane to stay warm, risking frostbite just to stay alive. In Florida, it's the opposite: humidity, flooding, hurricanes, and people trying to survive in vehicles with no AC, no insulation, no storm protection. Climate change is compounding the housing crisis, but leadership still treats RV living like a fringe issue, not the front line of a national emergency. Public health risks are escalating. RVs aren't built for permanent housing. Sanitation is limited. Access to clean water, trash disposal, and healthcare is inconsistent at best. And yet, people stay because the alternative is worse. Emergency shelters are full. Subsidized housing is years away. Private rentals are unaffordable. The system doesn't just lack capacity, it lacks urgency. And then there's the impact on children. Families with kids now make up a growing segment of RV dwellers. Kids attending school by day, sleeping in Walmart lots by night, doing homework on cramped tables, washing up in gas station bathrooms, navigating the social stigma of being unhoused in one of the richest countries on earth. That's not just a failure of housing policy. That's a national disgrace. This crisis has also laid bare the deep racial and economic disparities baked into the American housing market. Communities of color, already more likely to face evictions, redlining, and wage inequality, are disproportionately represented among RV dwellers. The gap between those who own homes and those living in vehicles is more than financial. It's systemic. And every year that passes without meaningful reform makes that gap wider, deeper, and harder to close. So, where do we go from here? First, the denial has to stop. This is not temporary. This is not marginal. It's mainstream. When cities like Los Angeles and Phoenix have more people living in vehicles than in shelters, the data speaks for itself. Every level of government must stop treating RV homelessness as a nuisance and start treating it as a structural emergency. Zoning reform is essential. Restrictive zoning laws that prohibit multifamily housing, or ADUs, accessory dwelling units, are a major driver of the affordability crisis. We need more housing faster and in more places. That means legalizing affordable housing, not just in select corridors, but across entire regions. Next, we need serious investment in community-led support, not just charity, not just grants. Long-term, scalable programs that provide safe parking zones with sanitation, security, case management, and pathways to permanent housing. Cities that have tried this on a pilot level have seen progress. But pilot programs aren't enough. They need funding, infrastructure, political backing, and wages. We can't talk about housing without talking about income. The federal minimum wage hasn't changed since 2009. Meanwhile, rents have doubled or tripled in major cities. This isn't math. It's exploitation. If a full-time worker can't afford a one-bedroom apartment, the economy isn't working. It's extracting. Healthcare must be part of the equation. Many RV dwellers are dealing with chronic health issues, mental and physical, that are worsened by unstable living conditions. Mobile clinics, street outreach, and integrated care should be standard, not exceptional. Ignoring health means accelerating decline. And finally, the narrative needs to shift. This isn't a story about freeloaders or criminals. It's a story about a broken system that's being patched together by the people it failed. It's about teachers living in vans, nurses sleeping in RVs, single parents doing everything right and still losing their homes. That's not freedom. That's failure. We are at a fork in the road. Continue ignoring the crisis and watch the encampments grow, the social divisions harden, and public trust collapse. Or confront the crisis with the full weight of policy, investment, and political will. Those are the choices. There is no middle ground. This isn't just a housing issue. It's an economic issue, a moral issue, a justice issue. And the longer we pretend otherwise, the more irreversible the damage becomes. If you've made it this far, you already know the truth. You've seen the RVs lining your streets, parked behind businesses, crowding the edges of your community. You know someone living in one. You may be living in one yourself. So don't stay silent. If this hit home, hit like, share it with someone who needs to see it. Comment below with what you're seeing where you live. And subscribe, because this story isn't going away and neither are we. We're covering this every step of the way until the people who broke this system are forced to fix it. Because housing is not a luxury. It's a right. And no one should have to live on wheels just to survive. RV homelessness isn't some outlier. It's the new face of the American housing crisis. It's the result of policy decisions made in boardrooms, state houses, and city councils where the people most affected were never in the room. It's what happens when housing becomes an investment vehicle instead of a human necessity. And now, across 10 states, the fallout is parked in plain view. California didn't wake up one morning with RV-lined streets. This is a decade of underbuilding affordable units, of local resistance to low-income housing, of skyrocketing rents in cities where wages never caught up. It's state leaders offering token programs while luxury condos rise, and working families fall through the cracks. People aren't moving into RVs because it's easy. They're doing it because every other option has been blocked. Arizona and Nevada marketed themselves as affordable alternatives until they weren't. Now those same states are overwhelmed by internal migration, dried up housing stock, and climate conditions that make living in a vehicle a health hazard. But the political class hasn't pivoted. They haven't invested. They haven't adapted. They've chosen to criminalize poverty rather than confront the economic rot that caused it. Washington and Oregon have tried progressive labels. But slogans don't solve housing. Without scalable solutions, more units, better pay, strong tenant protections, RV encampments grow. People who once rented apartments are now priced out and punished for it. Their stories aren't told at policy summits. They're told in cold parking lots, in overcrowded safe zones, in the dark corners where people just want to rest without being harassed or ticketed. In Texas and Florida, the crisis is hidden under sunshine and slogans. These states sell the illusion of economic freedom while doing nothing to protect the people building that economy. RV homelessness isn't freedom. It's exhaustion. It's driving an hour to a job that doesn't pay enough to live indoors. It's hiding in plain sight in church parking lots and behind shopping plazas because there's nowhere else to go. Montana and New Mexico offer a harsher lens. There, it's not just affordability, it's isolation. Services are few and far between. Winter brings danger. Summer brings fire. And the social safety net? Threadbare. RV life in these places isn't about mobility. It's about survival in the absence of options. This is the truth. The American dream, as it's been sold for generations, is breaking down. And RV homelessness is one of the most visible signs of that collapse. You cannot ignore an RV parked outside your neighborhood school or library. You cannot pretend this isn't happening when entire blocks are lined with families who've done everything right and still lost their homes. If you're seeing this in your city, your state, your street, don't scroll by, hit like, share this video, drop a comment, and tell us what's really going on. And subscribe, because the voices living in those RVs deserve to be heard. This isn't just a crisis. It's a reckoning. And we're not done until the country finally wakes up.